Have you ever looked at a whale's flipper and wondered why the bones inside look, well, kind of like a human hand? Or thought about how a tiny bacterium can suddenly become immune to our strongest antibiotics? The answer to both of those, and so much more, is one incredibly powerful idea: evolution. So let's break down how this single concept tells the entire story of life on our planet.
I mean, just think about it. From the smallest microbe you can't even see, to the giant blue whale, our world is just bursting with this incredible, mind-boggling diversity of life. But why? Why all the different kinds? Well, that is the big question, and evolution is what gives us the answer. We're going to see exactly how.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the basics. What even is evolution? Then we'll get into the engine of change. What fuels it? After that, we'll look at the forces that steer everything, what comes out the other end, and finally, bring it all home to see how evolution is happening right here, right now. Okay, let's dive right in. The word evolution gets thrown around all the time, but what does it actually, mean from a biological point of view? Let's get a really clear definition on the table.
Okay, let's unpack this, because really, every single word here counts. First up, heritable characteristics. That just means traits that are passed down through your DNA. We're not talking about something you get during your lifetime like a scar or a tan. And the second part, over successive generations, is absolutely crucial. You see, evolution isn't something that happens to you as an individual. Nope, it's a change that happens to whole populations, bit by bit, over really, really long stretches of time.
So if evolution is all about change over time, well, how does that change get started? What does it need to get going? It needs some raw materials, some fuel for the fire. Let's take a look at what those are.
Think of it like a recipe. You can't bake a cake without flour and sugar, right? Well, you can't have evolution without these two essential ingredients. You need heredity, the fact that traits get passed on, and you need variation, the fact that there are differences to begin with. You mix those two together and bam, you've got the raw stuff for evolution to work with.
So, heredity. This is all about the blueprint for life itself, DNA. The best way to think about it is like a recipe book. It's the information, the instructions, that gets copied and handed down from parent to child over and over again. It's why kids tend to look like their parents. And this is a great way to think about it. The recipe versus the final dish. Your genotype is your specific genetic code. It's that internal recipe written in your DNA. But your phenotype? That's the result. It's all your observable traits, your height, your eye color, even some of your behaviors. It's the final dish that's been cooked up from that recipe, with a little influence from the environment too.
But here's the thing. For evolution to happen, you can't have every recipe be an exact copy. You need variety. And that variety, that spice of life, comes from a few places. Mutation is the big one. It's the ultimate source of brand new traits. Then you've got sexual recombination, which is like shuffling a deck of cards. It doesn't create new cards, but it creates all new hands. And finally, gene flow is when individuals move between groups, bringing their unique genetic cards into a new game.
Okay, so we've got our ingredients, traits being passed down, and lots of variation in those traits. But something has to actually do something with all that. What pushes change in one direction or another? That's where the driving forces of evolution come in.
And this is the famous, elegant idea from Charles Darwin, natural selection. It's so powerful because it's so simple. It just takes 3 steps. 1, there's variation in a population. Check, we've covered that. 2, that variation can be inherited. Check, that's heredity. And 3, this is the secret sauce. Some of those variations give an individual a better shot at surviving and having kids. It's not complicated. Over time, those winning traits just naturally become more common.
So what does this look like in the real world? The peppered moth is the classic go-to example, and for good reason. Before the Industrial Revolution in England, almost all of these moths were a light speckled color, and it was perfect. They were totally camouflaged on the light-colored trees. But then, everything changed.
And just look at this shift. It's dramatic. When the Industrial Revolution kicked into high gear, factories just coated everything in black soot. Suddenly, those light-colored moths, the ones that used to be perfectly hidden, were sticking out like a sore thumb for birds to eat. But remember that rare dark-colored moth? All of a sudden, it had the perfect camouflage. So they survived better, they had more babies, and they passed on those dark-colored genes. The entire moth population literally evolved right in front of everyone's eyes.
But natural selection isn't the only game in town. There's another force called genetic drift. You know, if natural selection is survival of the fittest, where the environment kind of picks the winners, then genetic drift is more like survival of the luckiest. It's pure random chance. Imagine a forest fire or a flood that just happens to wipe out a few individuals by sheer bad luck. It wasn't because they were less fit, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. This can cause random shifts in a population's genes, especially in small groups.
All right, so you take these forces, selection and drift, and you let them run for, say, millions of years. What do you end up with? Well, you end up with the incredible shape of life itself. Let's look at the results.
The biggest result is something called adaptation. This is the amazing process where organisms become better and better suited to where they live. Think about a cactus in the desert with its spines to save water, or a polar bear's white coat in the Arctic. These aren't accidents. They are adaptations, fine-tuned by natural selection over countless generations. And here is one of the most powerful, most beautiful pieces of evidence we have for evolution: homologous structures. Just look at the bones in a bat's wing, a primate's hand, and a whale's flipper. They're doing totally different jobs, flying, grabbing, swimming, but they are built from the exact same set of bones. Why? Because they all inherited that same basic blueprint from a common ancestor way back when. Evolution then just tinkered with that design for different purposes. It's like finding family history written right into our bodies. So what happens when you let this tinkering run for a really, really long time? Well, eventually, some populations become so different from their ancestors that they can't even breed with them anymore. And just like that, you have a whole new species. This process, called speciation, is the grand finale. It's what created every single one of the millions of different life forms we see today. It answers that big question we asked at the very beginning.
Now, it's easy to think of this as something that happened in the distant past, with dinosaurs and fossils. But that's not the whole story. Evolution is happening all around us, right now, and understanding it is more important than ever.
So why should you care about this today? Well, in medicine, we are in a constant evolutionary arms race with bacteria and viruses that are evolving to resist our drugs. In agriculture, literally every fruit, vegetable, and farm animal we have is the result of thousands of years of us guiding evolution through artificial selection. And get this, in computer science, engineers are now using evolutionary algorithms that mimic natural selection to solve incredibly complex problems, like designing more efficient jet engines. It's everywhere.
This quote from the famous biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky just nails it. Evolution isn't just another chapter in the biology textbook. It is the grand, unifying theory of all life. It's the framework that makes sense of everything from the tiniest gene to the entire ecosystem. And that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to chew on. Evolution never stops. It's still going. It's happening to us right now. In our modern world, with all its technology, medicine, and global travel, what traits are being favored? What changes are we humans undergoing as a species? What does our own evolutionary future look like? It's pretty amazing to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.